Hello, everybody. I am Jax James, NORML's. Oh, look, it has my other title on there. Sorry about that. I am also the Texas NORML's executive director. I didn't know that that was on there, but I am state policy manager to talk to you guys today about a lot of filings that are going on across the country. A lot of legislative sessions are about to start, so pre-filing is beginning or have begun. In fact, I am a day late on this live stream to you guys because yesterday I was actually at the Texas State Capitol doing our first day of legislative session. It was really busy and hectic, and great to be back in the building. A lot of legislatures work differently, but in Texas, ours meets every 2 years. So it's been a hot minute. So I would love it if you guys would drop in the comments where you're watching from. And let's go ahead and start talking about newly filed legislation. So Kentucky has had a lot going on. There's two bills, House Bill 48 and House Bill 22, that want to legalize legalize cannabis. So 48 would put a question before the voters asking them to legalize the adult use of cannabis. And if approved, it would allow for adults to possess up to an ounce of cannabis flower and cultivate up to 5 plants in their private residence. And then there's complementary legislation, HB 22, which would create the Kentucky Cannabis Control Board, would prohibit employers from sanctioning workers who use cannabis while away from their jobs. And this governing agency would be responsible for establishing all of the regulations having to do with the program. Additionally, there's Senate Bill 51, which wants to legalize possession, cultivation, production, processing, packaging, transportation, testing, marketing, sale, and use of both medical cannabis and adult use cannabis. The bill allows for an individual to possess up to an ounce of flower and cultivate up to 5 plants at a time. It would also expunge past marijuana-related convictions. So if you are watching from Kentucky, click the link for our policy update today, and you will find a link to the action alert for those. Additionally, there's two bills, complementary legislation, Senate Bill 47 and House Bill 107, that seek to establish a medical cannabis program by allowing patients with a bona fide patient and practitioner relationship to access medical cannabis if their practitioner deems they could benefit. The legislation institutes a governing body to decide THC limits, methods of use and consumption, and a patient would be allowed to have a 30-day supply of their medication at their residence and a 10-day supply on their person. The bill also provides for certain patient and caregiver protections while allowing for the use of medical cannabis at school. Patients are not considered under the influence solely based on THC metabolites being in their system. The legislation, however, does not allow for inhaled cannabis uptake methods, nor does it allow for home cultivation. This bill has come after multiple committee hearings in advance of the session to determine what they want the program to look like legislatively. So that there's one more bill in Kentucky I want to touch on, House Bill 47, and it would seek to eliminate civil or criminal penalties associated with the sale of personal quantities, so up to an ounce of flower or 5 grams of concentrates of marijuana. Let's move on to Minnesota. There's actually a hearing going on today regarding HF 100 and its companion bill SF 73. They seek to allow adults to purchase up to 2 ounces of cannabis and cultivate up to 8 plants. In addition, it creates a system for the licensed private businesses, and even municipalities and counties could own and operate government dispensaries. Those with prior marijuana convictions would have their records automatically expunged. The legislation also allows for on-site consumption lounges and delivery services. Love the delivery services. It would also contain language banning the sales of unregulated synthetic cannabinoids, which is consistent with the Board of Pharmacy rules put in place last year. Lastly, the legislation promotes social equity and inclusion, prioritizing those in underrepresented populations, such as people living in low-income neighborhoods, military veterans who may have lost their honorable status due to a cannabis-related offense, and more. So if you are in Minnesota, there's a hearing happening today in the Committee on Commerce, Finance, and Policy, and there's also an action alert in our blog today that you can participate in. Before I jump to Missouri, I'm going to come to the comments and just check out what y'all talking about over here. What you talking about? All right, we've got people from Texas. Hello, friends. Illinois. We've got some information about THC on here. Alabama. Okay. Keep commenting where you guys are watching from. I see the people from Texas. I will get to us momentarily. But in Missouri, HB 504 seeks to make those that are currently incarcerated for marijuana-related offenses eligible for early release. It also allows for serving a sentence, for those serving a sentence for marijuana-related offenses to petition the court for early release, and the legislation requires that the Department of Corrections immediate release petitioners from custody if they are being incarcerated solely for a marijuana-related offense. Additionally, SB 443 seeks to prevent family court participants from being discriminated against for their participation in the medical program. It would make clear that qualified medical marijuana patients are not in violation of family law court conditions if they use their medication. And it further prevents family courts from restricting parental rights just because of a person's status as a qualified patient. Senate Bill 457 seeks to criminalize the disclosure of medical cannabis patients' information to unauthorized parties, thereby protecting their patient privacy. And House Bill 687 seeks to explicitly permit for the use of medical cannabis by qualified registered patients on college campuses. So a bit of legislation out of Missouri. I believe that there will be several more bills filed, but if you live in Missouri, make sure you click on our blog and participate in those action alerts. Now, in New Hampshire, HB 82 seeks to enhance employment rights of qualified medical marijuana patients by preventing employers from refusing to hire or firing qualified medical marijuana patients solely because of a positive drug test. Expect more legislation out of New Hampshire in the coming weeks. In New Jersey, we've got Assembly Bill 4944 and Senate Bill 3394, which seek to authorize medical cannabis patients who have been diagnosed with sickle cell anemia, which is not currently covered underneath the program. There's an action alert included in our blog there. In North Dakota, we've got Senate Bill 2068, which would increase the maximum monthly purchasable amount of products containing THC by qualified patient, doubling the amount to 8,000 milligrams. In South Carolina, there is a set of bills, HB 3486 and HB 3226, which both seek to create license programs for medical cannabis. And then there's also HB 3561, which seeks to decriminalize the possession of 1 ounce of marijuana or less, reducing the penalties to a civil infraction rather than a criminal violation. In South Dakota, there is SD1, which seeks to expand the qualifying conditions to include those with HIV, sclerosis, cancer, epilepsy, and PTSD. Now to Texas, my home state. We have quite a few bills that have been introduced and more are coming. There's 2 bills having to do with medical cannabis, SB 121 and SB 127. Both seek to do a let doctors decide type of program, and both would create some parental protections for medical cannabis patients. There's quite a few bills having to do with reduction, HB 127 and its companion SB 87, the penalty for concentrates, which is currently a blanket first-degree state jail felony, to a lesser punishment depending on the amount possessed. Then there's HB 218, which reduced the penalties not only for flour, but for concentrates. It further instructs officers to no longer make arrests for possession of personal amounts or for paraphernalia, and it facilitates a process for the expungement of past marijuana convictions. HB 388 seeks to reduce penalties for the possession of 2 ounces or less of marijuana while also striking certain enhancements. And HB 520 seeks to remove and reduce penalties related to multiple levels of the possession of cannabis flower. And SB 208 relates to any activities with the delivery or possession of cannabis flower and reducing those. There is some legislation having to do with legalization here in Texas. SB 209 would allow those 21 and up to possess 2.5 ounces of flower, 15 grams of cannabis concentrates, and would allow for the home cultivation of up to 12 plants, while also instituting parental protections for legal cannabis consumers. Now, in Texas, we do not have the ability to collect signatures at the state level and change our marijuana laws because they are governed at the state level. So while there's some local jurisdictions that can implement some more limited initiatives to actually change the law in Texas, we have to go through the legislature, or we have to propose a constitutional amendment, which must additionally be put forth by a legislator. So these are known as joint resolutions, pun intended. So SJR 22 would put on the November ballot in 2024 a measure that would read the constitutional amendment directing the legislature to authorize and regulate the possession and cultivation of sale cannabis. So the way that the constitutional amendment works is that it would need to pass both chambers with a supermajority first. Now, our last 2 states to talk about before I come back over to the comments, we've got Utah, HB 72, which would allow medical cannabis pharmacies to deliver, which I think is extremely important that we have delivery. In Washington, SB 5123 seeks to prevent restrictions of job opportunities based on past cannabis use. It would make it unlawful for an employer to discriminate against a job applicant solely based on their off-the-clock cannabis use. Very important employment protections there in Washington. Now, of course, since I drafted this blog, more legislation has already been filed across the country. So we at NORML and the team are continuing to look at those bills, review them, and craft action alerts along with our chapters. So make sure that you guys stay tuned to more legislation coming up. Now, let's say you did not maybe hear your state on that update. You can go to normal.org/act. At the top, you'll see our federal action alerts. And if you scroll down, you'll see a dynamic American map. You can hover over your state and it will show you any active legislation or action alerts that are pending in your state. So make sure that you participate in that. And of course, with legislative sessions quickly either having started or going to start, I encourage all of you guys to check out our chapters tab on the website and see if there's a chapter near you so that you can engage and be boots on the ground in your state to make sure that either we are legalizing cannabis, improving programs, decriminalizing. It all depends on the state that you're in. So I'm going to just check real quick to see if you guys have any comments. We've got some people watching from Oregon also. That's great. Got some people from California watching too. Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, I'm not seeing any specific questions on legislation. So let me just again encourage you to check out the blog, go to normal.org/act, hover over your state and see what actions are going on currently in your state. Of course, we will see more and more bills rolling in over the upcoming weeks, and we are excited to continue to connect with you guys and get you engaged with the legislature in your state. So, on that note, I will see you guys next Tuesday in the afternoon to tell you about what new bills have either been filed or bills that have been advancing across the country. So thank you so much for tuning in today, you guys, and I will see you next week.